Did you ever expect Powerline and those songs to have such staying power?
I didn't expect any of it. Yeah, at first, when it was a huge disappointment when it first came out.
Close, scary did it get for you?
We really felt like we were getting bombarded constantly by roadblocks. All of those things were moments of, oh crap, what now? In 2015 at D23, they did a panel discussion. What they told me was that they turned away hundreds of people, that the room wasn't big enough, that they totally underestimated who would want to sit through a panel. And I thought then, oh, there's something really going on here.
So just to set the tone for today's discussion, as a point of reference, this right here is my wife's wallet that she currently has. Likewise, when I was getting ready to do this, I was like, asked my wife, do you happen to have any Goofy movie t-shirts like it? Where she goes, well, actually, I've got a couple of them. So she had a Powerline hoodie that she gave me, which I'm in Texas, which is not the ideal thing to wear. But when I received the DM from you, read it, and I went, oh, I know my wife's going to freak out about this one. Handed her my phone. And she goes, oh, really? That's
well,
our
maybe
household.
she should be doing this interview.
So possibly, and I absolutely wrote out my questions with her, but she would be just freaking out talking to all of you wait, the people that made the movie, my childhood, I can't do this. She gets so giddy and excited that she just kind of shuts down in the starstruck mode. So just seeing the DM from her brought so much joy. And as for me, I watched the Goof Troop TV show growing up. And so I went to go see the movie just because, they're doing a movie out of that TV show that I watched. So even for me, this is one that I saw it in the theater right when it came back 30 years ago.
You're one of 100, I think, who went and saw it.
Me and my sister, my mom, we made up 3% of the original audience for the film. So just kind of as just a quick little introduction, just so we know who everybody is. If you could just each kind of go around who you are, what you do, and your connection to this particular project.
Kevin?
Want to start with Kevin?
Sure. I'm Kevin Lima, and I am the director of a Goofy movie.
I'm Christopher Ninnis. I'm the co-director of Not Just a Goof.
And I am the other co-director, Eric Hamilton, of Not Just a Goof. And we love a Goofy movie.
Yeah.
Good
sounds
thing.
like we're all it sounds like we're all on the same page here. Kind of on that note, kind of our once again, kind of how everyone got involved with this. With a Goofy movie, Kevin, how did it first come across your plate, and how did you kind of get started in that process? Now, for when people watch the documentary, all of this is more elaborately explained. But Kevin, if you wanted to give the quick version of it.
Yeah, sure. I was at Disney Feature Animation. I raised my hand and said, hey, I want to be a director. And they said, well, sorry, we've got the next 7 years planned out. So I left the studio in search of becoming a director. And a Goofy movie just came and fell on my plate, to be quite honest with you. I was doing a little freelance while they were in the very, very early stages on the movie. And they asked me to direct it. And the rest is history.
And kind of following up on that to our documentary guys, what made you want to tell this story right now? What was right about this moment that you wanted to spend the time to dive in deep on this movie at this time?
Well, Eric and I are just huge fans of a Goofy movie. It really deeply affected us in our childhoods. And we realized that there's a huge cult status for a Goofy movie. The fandom is just ginormous. It's growing all the time. And we realized that there really was no behind the scenes documentary. There was nothing on the DVD. There was nothing online, not to the extent that we wanted to see. So we really just wanted to make a film that we'd be interested in. We're fans first and foremost. So that was really the goal, was to make something for the fandom.
And I think we were kind of trying to prove that this belonged with all the other big Disney movies at the time, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast. It's a classic, just like all those others that people think about.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, obviously the documentary dives into some, we'll talk about it more, but a Goofy movie is dramatically more popular now than it was when it came out. And like I'll be talking to people and they'll get like offended if you don't mention a Goofy movie with the Disney Renaissance films. And one of my friends who's super into the horror community, that's his thing. This movie was his childhood. And like he's like watching slashers, brutal films, like, yeah, but a Goofy movie, if you say one bad thing about that movie, I'm coming after. Like he takes it personally.
Well, the Goofy movie does open with a horror sequence, right?
There you go.
Maybe that's why.
The perfect situation right there that kind of, led him into that defining his childhood. So I guess kind of tying together kind of both of these, both for all of you, when did you first realize that this movie kind of had that second life? That it not just kind of some nostalgia, but there was a true love and connection on such a deeper level for this film?
For me, I became aware of it probably like I knew there were touches of it leading up to this date, but in 2015 at D23, they did a panel discussion. I couldn't be there. I was at Eric's wedding. And so what I realized was that what they told me was that they turned away hundreds of people, that the room wasn't big enough, that they totally underestimated who would want to sit through a panel about a Goofy movie. And I thought then, oh, there's something really going on here. And then the whole thing started taking off online with like the perfect cast, people doing the dance, people doing little YouTube videos about how much they love the movie and little analytical sort of breakdowns of the film. And then I went, I think was it 2019? I can't remember exactly when it was. Maybe 2019. They did a screening at the El Capitan. And it was like watching the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Right.
Audience was like throwing lines back at the screen. They were dancing. They were all singing along with the songs. And I was sitting there in the audience just sobbing, realizing, oh, this has gotten so big.
And then to the
yeah, I mean, Eric, and I think we always knew how important it was to a big, passionate fan base. Like I mentioned, we're definitely two of them. Excuse me. But I think like while we were making the documentary, this Atlanta episode came out that Donald Glover did, which was like a fake mockumentary about a creative Thomas Washington who made who was so important to the Walt Disney history, and he's the one that was responsible for good. And it really like blew our minds, because I think that was the real moment where I thought, oh, this is even bigger than what we're thinking this is. Like there's a cultural moment happening with this movie that's bigger than all of us. Yeah.
Kind of going back to the creation of it, I suppose this will tie into the documentary because it elaborates on some of these stories and everything like that. But kind of when you're making a Goofy movie, of course, the reason it connected is that it has so much heart to it. What was that process of trying to make something true to Goofy, who became famous for these shorts of him playing, football and getting beat up, and then telling as human of a story as is possible, a father and son story? What's that balance between those two things when creating it?
Yeah, it was tricky, to be quite honest with you. We were lucky in that Goofy is a character who's evolved over time, right? He started out as Dippy Dog. He was just a hayseed way back in the day. He became sort of one of the Fab Five, or, started with just three of them, to be quite honest with you. And so we felt like, because we were telling a story that was based on Goof Troop to begin with, right? It's an offshoot of that television show, and that was about a father and a son. But we felt like we could take the next step with the character. And because we had to fill 78 minutes or 80 minutes, we thought, okay, we need a little bit more. We need something more from him. We started down the road of making the movie, and it started really gag heavy to begin with. And as the movie spoke to us, as these animated movies do, and as we got pressure from Jeffrey Katzenberg, who wanted it to be more emotional, we basically ended up where we did, with something that I think is truly sort of fits in the evolution of the character. Those who know Goofy from a Goofy movie think that that is who Goofy is, right?
Yeah.
Because that was their introduction to him. So we just took the next step in the evolution, and quite honestly, I came to the movie with my own daddy issues, so I superimposed a little bit of myself on the movie as well, and it turned into what it did. And in fact, it wasn't at all loved when it first came out. Critics were really like, "This isn't the Goofy we remember. We remember the guy from the shorts, not this guy. What's going on here?" But that's totally flipped. That narrative is totally flipped.
Now, kind of even diving in on that a little bit, because that's kind of one of the major themes with the legacy of this film is how it was received when it came out, even in its creation versus the way it's perceived of now, critically, audiences, all of those different pieces. As the creator that has been on that process with it, and you've had other movies that have come out and were received better by or really well by critics at the time. How do you process that sort of emotional journey of your creation that you dedicated years of your life to and had such a complicated roller coaster of emotions with it?
Yeah, at first, when it was a huge disappointment when it first came out, because we all believed in it and loved it, but for some reason the critics at that time didn't embrace it. And I moved on, to be quite honest with you. I had gone into it thinking it was going to be a stepping stone to something bigger, hoping it would lead to something bigger. And it did, right? The political situation at the time and the movie having been viewed by feature animation, they offered me Tarzan. So that was a really good stepping stone. And I kind of just forgot about it, to be quite honest with you. I just sort of put it aside and said, okay, it did its part in my professional career. And then, as we talked about earlier, I just became aware that, something's happening here with this movie.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest with you, now it's my most embraced film. I mean,
right.
the audience embraced it in a way that I couldn't even have imagined at the time.
Yeah.
And then these guys, right? These guys approach me and they want to make a documentary. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well, it's one of those ones where kind of exactly what you guys said about something like this doesn't exist about it. And if you'd asked me to pitch what I would want a documentary for, I wouldn't have immediately gone to it. And as soon as I heard you guys were making it, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Oh yeah, I'd like to hear about that. And like I said, then I got the DM from you, and I was like, oh, I gotta check that out. Of course I'm interested in that. But on that note, over to our documentaries. As you're researching the making of this film, what was kind of some of the crazier things you discovered about the making of the film that either both that are in the documentary, or if there's some things that maybe some stories you weren't able to include for whatever reason, but some of those other little details where you're like, wow, that happened?
I mean, a lot of the crazy stuff is in the documentary, but we did we got a treasure trove from Kevin of all these tapes. So there's hours and hours and hours, like 100 hours of footage that we went through. And there's several different cuts of a Goofy movie at different stages. And we showed it in the film. It's like pencil tests and everything. But there's scenes that didn't make it into the final film of a Goofy movie. Like there was a scene where Goofy and Max were like camping out in like somebody's backyard, and they come out and start shooting at Goofy and Max. They're your favorite scene.
Yeah, there's a section of our documentary where we talk about deleted or alternate songs from a Goofy movie.
Yeah. And
we show about 10 seconds of this song called Bad Bad Boy. But the whole song is actually boarded. It's like a 4.5 minute song, I think. It's fairly long, but it's a dream sequence where Pete is singing to Goofy. But it is wild. It is the craziest. At one point, Goofy is there with like an alien xenomorph, like an actual like alien from Alien. Like it like blew my mind watching that.
Pete's in a Evel Knievel outfit. Like it's pretty wild.
It's awesome. I hope one day people can see that. It's just, I love it. I tried really hard to get it in the movie, actually, and
Yeah.
it took everyone else telling me that this it's too long, so we cut it.
What, like that sequence when it's like, there's actually a bunch of other songs. It's like, oh, they're gonna play a song. And it's like, no, you guys had like 4 different songs,
Yeah.
and people like, I couldn't believe it when this song was cut out of the movie, and they referenced a totally different song than the one you're referring to because there are all of these great little bits, and immediately it's like, I want to hear all of these. I want to know what was this? How did this fit into the movie?
Unfortunately, there weren't any other Powerline songs. These were all character songs that we were trying on for size and seeing how they fit. But I wish there were other Powerline songs we could. I'd really love a Powerline album. That's what I'd love.
I mean, it's true. Of like, I don't know if you last year Disney put out an album called A Whole New Sound. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I am.
And like, Eye to Eye is on there, and it's like the best song on the entire thing because it's just a great song, and so it translates well into different genres and things like that. But like in our car rides, that's in all of our playlists with the kids and everything like that because they're just great pop songs.
Do you know what we need, Kevin, is a Powerline movie? I'm just saying.
Are you saying?
Yeah. If you
We'll see what happens.
What will it take to get the Powerline movie so that you can get that Powerline album that you want?
It's
get the movie.
It's going to take America demanding.
Yes. All right. Now we know our job with this documentary. We must demand a Powerline movie.
Stick through the credits. There's a post-credit scene. That's all I can say.
I guess for you, Kevin, was there anything you learned about the creation of the movie through the creation of the documentary? Was there something that the footage, the conversations that maybe you didn't realize or maybe you'd completely forgotten about that was like really surprising to you?
I can point to one thing immediately is that I thought the movie cost a certain amount of money, and my producer said, no, it costs much more than that. That was a little bit of a shock to me because I've been going around for the last 30 years saying that it costs 20, I forget what it was, 18 million maybe?
18 million.
18 million. He said, no, it's more like 27 million, 28 million or something. Yeah. So that was a little bit of a shock to me. They totally kept that number away from me all these years. I don't know if there's much more. I mean, I did give them the box of tapes that I had recorded, so I was quite aware of many of the things that I was surprised by. I didn't remember I had some of those things, but when they showed up in the documentary, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember us doing this.
So during the documentary, one of the most fascinating elements to me was the complicated relationship with Jeffrey Katzenberg, where it seemed like he was both your biggest advocate and the guy with the most insane suggestions. That you hear them and everyone hears them and goes, that's stranger than fiction. How could that possibly be a real thing? But also in the context of it, he was the guy that kind of made it so the movie got made in this whole other sense. Can you unpack that relationship with him to like kind of help us understand that process of working with him?
Well, Jeffrey, like the characters in the movie, is both the villain and the hero, in a sense. He plays both of those roles. And we always, I had some history with him already because I'd worked with him at Feature Animation. So I kind of knew that Jeffrey comes in with guns a-blazing. And he did push us to make the movie more emotional. But at the same time, he had suggestions that you kind of had to like steer him away from. You had to say, okay, I understand what you're going for. I understand what you want, but your way of getting there it's just terrible. It's just going to ruin the evolution of Goofy. I mean, imagine Goofy. I mean, I don't want to give it away, but But imagine he had a different voice. That would be just awful. It just wouldn't fit. So we have to figure out how to work around the man. And then when he left the studio, we were abandoned because he was our biggest advocate. He really was. He was trying to figure out, sort of from a financial side, how to create a cheaper, movie at a different price point. Could there be another way of releasing theatrical films, because the movies at Feature Animation were becoming like horribly expensive. And so he plays both roles. He is both hero and villain.
Yeah,
He continued to be throughout my career, by the way. It doesn't end with a Goofy movie. So it's so interesting.
Yeah, that the section on the Goofy's voice.
Yeah.
My wife and I, like, we're just looking at it like, are you kidding me? The whole like everything that's said during that whole section, we're like, how is this real? Who could possibly want that?
Well, think about it. You know, if you're trying to sell a movie, and at that time it was like James Earl Jones and Matthew Broderick, he had Bill Farmer. You know, how's he going to sell that on a poster, right? So he was looking, I think, for ways to up the ante as far as the marketing of the film. Yeah.
And then
luckily he didn't get his way.
Right. Well, I guess over to crafting the documentary side of things, for you guys that are telling the story of the making of it and having Katzenberg as that hero villain, what was that like for you in trying to piece together which interview clips, what information to try and place him in such an odd spot in the middle of the narrative?
Yeah, so we actually had conversations about, well, do we want to interview Jeffrey Katzenberg? Because there were a few people who said like, well, we could reach out to him and ask, like we could ask if you guys want to do that. And we gave that a lot of thought. He is such a prominent character, not only for a Goofy movie, but just the Disney Renaissance. But ultimately we decided that we wanted our film to be purely about the ragtag team that made this happen. And Jeffrey Katzenberg didn't quite fit into that puzzle piece, picture of it all. But we knew he still is important to the story because, like you said, we kind of, there's some humorous elements to how we perceive Jeffrey Katzenberg in our film for sure. But ultimately, by the end, Eric and I really felt like he is a hero of a Goofy movie. You don't have a Goofy movie without Jeffrey Katzenberg. He's super important to the story. And we're incredibly thankful for him in that sense. It's I hope people walk away from the movie. He definitely has a reputation of being this really strong Hollywood figure. And he certainly is that. But I hope by the end of it, you kind of see the heart and humanity of him as well. Like he cares deeply about these films. Like he really puts himself into these projects and wants them to succeed. He genuinely cares.
And it was one of the easier things for us to like put into the film and discover, because everybody that we interviewed, from Kevin to the head of story, the editor, all these people had the same stories about Jeffrey. And like, sometimes you ask, like you sort of get the game of telephone, like you hear stories a little bit differently. All these stories were pretty much the same. So we really got a sense of who Jeffrey was at the time. And it was very clear to us. So it was kind of easy to put that in for us.
Even in writing my questions for this interview, my wife and I craft them together. The only question that she nixed and said, no, you can't ask that question, was one that it framed him as kind of the villain of the story. She goes, no, he's this. He's not one. He can't ask a question like that because that's dishonest. The documentary itself makes it clear it's not that. And because he's like in such an odd place that you can ask the question that's like, was this guy trying to mess with things? Like, no, he was the savior of it. But he also had some interesting perspectives on it.
I don't think there's anyone who's directed at Disney or, produced at Disney who doesn't have that same, like, he so believes in the movies and he's so passionate about making them as good as they can be. And he pushes you so hard, but at the same time, he comes at you from left field sometimes. And you're like, what? No, how are we going to, and you have meetings behind the scenes trying to figure out how you're going to go into a meeting with Jeffrey to convince him that this is a terrible idea. In the Goofy movies case, we decided, let's show him. Let's do a recording session with Bill doing his own voice and show him that it's the wrong choice. But in an odd way, it helped us make the movie more emotional, and it helped Bill ground his performance in a different way because he went on that journey. So it's interesting that if Jeffrey asked us to do something, we found a way to talk him out of it, but that way of talking him out of it became kind of a great stepping stone to making the movie better.
And I think a lot of times when people discuss studio executives, general public, like our perception is, just let the creatives do their thing. Studio heads, they're clueless, they're out of touch. But it's a lot more complicated than that. Of like, they're trying to make a movie that will be successful with a bunch of competing value sets, and it's tricky.
Have you watched any of the studio?
I have. I was going to bring that up myself. I was actually lucky. I was lucky enough to be at the premiere of it at South by Southwest out here in Austin. So I've seen the first 2 episodes of it. Yep.
We've been watching it. It's fascinating because it's all true. I mean, it's heightened, right? And I'm it's totally over the top, but everything they're talking about is exactly what happens day to day in that business.
Yeah, and it's just both watching it. It's so funny.
Yeah. And
then you watching the interviews with Seth Rogen discussing it, he's like, everything in here came from some weird conversation we had. And trying to make that point of like, all of these guys, they want to make great movies, but they're stuck in this bizarre system that pushes them towards this insane stuff.
It is called show business after all, right? So there is a side of it that's totally run by business executives who have a totally different value set than the artists, and that's the battle.
And I guess on that, kind of looking at what they were doing at the time, trying to have that B team and the business, how can we do something cheaper that could still do well? Is that something you could even see Disney doing these days in their current climate?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because they're so IP sort of top dollar driven. They're not chasing after the smaller, my movie made in the movie theaters, it made $38 million. That's nothing. It's not even worth their effort nowadays to try to make something like that. So I can't see it happening. They do some stuff for Disney Plus now, right? They do, mostly IP driven stuff, but they do have a bunch of, television shows that they do and run. So they do it. They just do it for a different reason in a different way.
Yeah. Well, there's such something, beautiful, risky about, the imperfections of a Goofy movie. And then it's,
there was nobody telling us no, which was interesting, right? We were making it so fast that nobody told us, oh, no, you can't do Lester's Possum Park. You're making fun of the country fair Grand Prix. You can't do that. No, we don't do that here. We just did it. We had Bobby in our movie. Bobby, come on. He's your high school, stoner, basically. But we take like Cheese Whiz and we substitute it, and suddenly we're getting away with something that you never get away with in feature animation. So we got lucky. We flew under the radar.
Exactly. And it's those little flavors, the thing that when you're trying to make a movie that you want to make $1 billion, four-quadrant, every eye is on the entire thing, micromanaging every little detail. And you lose something that's just feels more personal. It feels a little bit more real. It's not optimized for everyone.
It feels immediate. In 1995, I think the movie felt like it was speaking directly to its audience, right? Our idea was always to make like a John Hughes movie, which was those movies are all about speaking to its audience at the time. They knew that teenagers were going to go see them. That's who the audience was. So they went for it. And we did kind of the same thing. We said, okay, how do we speak to today's youth with the film?
Well, even rewatching it, those little details in there, it's Pauly Shore. There's nothing more 1995 than Pauly Shore. But it's not like my kids don't watch it and go, what is this is very peculiar. Like my kids watch it and they go, just, it's a funny, goofy guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's entertaining, but as someone that was there in the 90s, I know exactly what we're doing with Pauly Shore there.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, he wouldn't, when we made the movie, he wouldn't put his name on it.
Mhm.
Not because he didn't like the movie, but because he didn't want us to use him to sell our movie. He didn't want the movie to be sold on his, like he was taking a page out of Robin Williams's, playbook for Aladdin. And I'm thinking like, you have no idea who you are. You're Pauly Shore.
Mhm.
So it's funny. It's really funny.
So kind of going back to making the documentary, and you're diving into all of this, and you referenced how there hasn't been a documentary like this about the movie, and kind of like those old special features of the past where you kind of dove into things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that just stood out to me is that it's pretty authentic. Like at times it puts people in a bad light. It doesn't put Disney always in the best light. What were you ever afraid of getting pushback from Disney, from some of the creative, from Katzenberg? How did that you approach that side of things?
Yeah, I think we're a little concerned or afraid of like what Disney may think when they saw it, but I have to give them credit. When we eventually did get it to Disney, we didn't get any creative notes on it.
It was shocking to me.
Yeah.
I thought for sure the guys were going to get some pushback.
Yeah, we expected them to say you got to take Katzenberg out, or there are just little moments throughout the film that are definitely real and raw and of whatever they were going through in that time, and we thought that stuff would get pushback. I mean, there's this once Katzenberg is out of the picture, the story takes a slightly darker turn. It's harder for this ragtag team of creatives to make their movie, and it could definitely look like maybe the studio wasn't as supportive. And all that stuff was up in the air. We had no idea what they'd say, but they were, to Eric's point, they were really, really just like championing the film, and they wanted it all. I mean, as soon as they saw it and we had our early conversations with them, they were saying like, we think this would be great for Disney Plus. Like we think you made a really great film. And it was just kind of, the harder stuff was just like the technical, like how do we go through the process of getting it on Disney Plus? But creatively it was not, there wasn't a lot of pushback. Yeah.
Yeah, those documentaries like this, behind the scenes like this, are the ones that are actually interesting. The ones that are just a puff piece for the movie, nobody cares about those. Nobody watches those because everybody knows that this is just PR for your movie. And if everybody says everything was wonderful and it was a great process and everything was nice and smooth, it's like, well, nobody believes that. Like, everybody knows, like, this is obviously not true. And it's like, I don't even watch any of those types of ones, but things like this are like the small details of how the whole thing might have fallen apart are so fascinating. Kind of on that note, there's a couple different things in this movie where it documents how it felt like a Goofy movie was about to kind of fall apart completely. I mean, how close did it get to falling apart, whether through bad suggestions, the mistake that was made in kind of the animation process, we had to start over, and then just the change when Katzenberg left? How close, scary did it get for you?
All of those things were moments of, oh crap, what now? Because we really felt like we were getting bombarded constantly by roadblocks, right? Everything from Disney feature animation takes over our studio and moves us down to a lower floor where it felt like I was working in my basement. It's so humiliating in some ways while they're up there drinking champagne. So it just felt like at every turn it could fall apart. we did have sort of the drive, because we were young and it was our first movie, to say, we're not going to let this happen. We're going to fight to the bitter end for this thing. And it was tough at times. And we actually lost we couldn't make our release date, right? We were supposed to be released in November of '94. We couldn't do it because of just something that happened in the filming of the footage of getting out dailies. We just discovered that there was something that we had to go back and fix that moved us. And they re-released, I think, The Lion King into theaters on that date that we were supposed to take. So it just felt like at every turn, like, oh man. And then the ultimate thing was Jeffrey getting booted, right? And us just saying, okay, we're dead now. And we were. I mean, honestly, the way the studio treated the movie at the time was not great. And so, but we've persevered, and here we are, which is, I think, just kind of friggin' amazing that we can be at this place now. It's crazy.
I don't know if maybe this is the right word to use it for, but like after Katzenberg left, what was it that it seemed like Disney was, I don't know, ashamed of the movie, or like they didn't know what to do with it? Like, I don't know if the right word for that is, but where did that come from exactly?
And, I can only guess, right? No one has come forward and said, we did this to you. But there's a couple of things at play, right? It's like, punish Jeffrey Katzenberg. That's one thing that happens, right? This happens all the time in studios. New people take over, and the movies that are coming out under the old regime get just slammed. But I also think there's a little bit of, feature animation couldn't really have a movie that was made at this price point coming out and being successful. Because it would have been bad for their bottom line, right? They would have gotten pressure to make their movies cheaper. So I think there was some of that. Jeffrey would have basically, said, screw you, we're doing this. But they had some power in that moment. So I think maybe that happened. This is all my conjecture, by the way. No one has said to me, we did this. So I think there were, a lot of things coming out against the movie at the time. The marketing campaign was suddenly shrunk down. Our big premiere was moved from the El Capitan in Hollywood to a cinema at Disney Springs in Florida, as far away from LA as possible. So a lot of things happened in that moment. There was supposed to be all this merchandising that was coming out, and I'd say half of it didn't make it to shelves. So there were a lot of things that were going on at the time.
Did you say there was one of the reunion or a showing, 5 years ago at the El Capitan? Guys,
do you remember, was it 2019?
I think it was 2019.
Yeah, it was around there. We were at that one.
Yeah.
So was something like that where your premiere was supposed to be there and they're like, nah, we'll do it over there. And you jump forward 25 years later. It's like, we're going to go to the El Capitan and it's going to be a rock star. That's got to be just wild. The crazy disconnect in that.
It is. It's just weird how the world sort of drops you right back. We're going to have a 30th anniversary this coming Saturday at the El Capitan. Again, the theater's already sold out.
Yeah.
So we're really excited about that. It just keeps happening. It's they're doing a big 30th anniversary sort of lunchtime party on the lot. Who would have here's this place that tried to crush you that is now celebrating you. It's kind of crazy to me.
They were telling us we were talking to them about that El Capitan event, the El Cap event, and they were like, it's sold out faster than usual. Like, we've done a few of these screenings, and even for a Goofy movie, which always sells, they're like, this time it sold like almost 3 times as fast.
Wow.
Which is mind blowing.
It's going to be crazy, guys. Strap in.
Yeah. Kind of back to the documentary, and making something like this takes years, full-time jobs. What was the hardest part in piecing together the full story of how this movie came together and what it's meant to people?
Yeah. Well, I think the hardest the post-production, the editorial is the hardest part for sure. The movie could have gone in 100 different ways. We're fans of a Goofy movie, so there's automatically certain expectations of what we would want to see in a film like this. And then there are these stories that no one knows that feel like, well, those are important to include. And then it was important to us to find our own emotional arc. We want our film to stand
out
on its own. It was important to us. A Goofy movie has such a strong emotional arc, and we knew there was an emotional story that we could tell through the fandom and through Kevin's story and even our own. And it was important to us that our film didn't feel like a puff piece documentary, that it did have depth and heart to it. And then you kind of siphon through everything else and you kind of see where you land, and you're like, oh, I think this is the path. This is the story. This is the order of things. We know people love a Goofy movie, so you want to make sure that you're giving them what they expect, which is, Tevin Campbell in the booth singing Eye to Eye, we're fortunate enough that Kevin even had that footage. But then you also want to surprise them and make it a journey. And there were so many great stories to include. And sometimes these stories would just come out organically and they would just match and match up with what they were saying. And sometimes Kevin would tell a story and we'd have the B-roll footage. And we're like, oh man, that's crazy that we actually have this moment that he's talking about. So the process was tedious, but it happened very organically at the same time, I would say.
Yeah. In a Goofy movie, at its core was kind of like a North Star for us because of all the emotional aspects to the film, like father-son relationships, all of those sort of things. Like we use those as themes in our film as well to have that emotional arc, because we wanted to be true to a Goofy movie and really, but like that's why we delve into Kevin's story and like how that fits into a Goofy movie. You see that it's based on something real and something human.
I'm going to bring up something else too, is that when I first saw an early cut, these guys' stories weren't in the movie. And I said, I think there's something personal here that you guys as documentarians can add. I knew that they had a relationship to the movie that was deeper than just, oh, I love this as a kid. I watched it time and time again. And I encouraged them to include them. And you can talk about this, but you guys weren't exactly embracing it to begin with. You were kind of like, I'm not sure I want to give that story up to the world.
Well, when you're talking about, well, first of all, we didn't make a Goofy movie. So our instinct was, well, we're not a part of the story. It doesn't make sense. And then you start to consider it and you're like, well, do I want parts of my childhood trauma streaming on Disney Plus? Which I think is a fair question for anyone to ask themselves. But, to Kevin's credit and making us really consider it and think about it, I think we both felt like, there's an opportunity here to, well, first of all, there's a cost to art, I think. And sometimes that's sharing vulnerabilities. And so that's one part of it. But then the other part of it is, well, if we're willing to share our stories, maybe someone will relate to that. Maybe it's a mirror for them to see themselves. And even if you haven't seen a Goofy movie, perhaps you'll see the story I'm sharing and you'll think, I know exactly what he's talking about. I can relate to that 5-year-old kid. And maybe it's not a Goofy movie. Maybe it's The Jungle Book. Maybe it's Toy Story. It could be anything. But and that was really, really the moment where we went, oh, this is worth maybe putting ourselves in. But it did take a lot of talk and consideration. It was not something we were eager to do. So, yeah.
Eric, Chris, did you talk to your dad about it?
I did. I talked to both my parents. it's strange. I didn't want to share too much of their story. So you're finding a balance of how much is too much or is enough. And that took some time, actually. And then you're animating it, and then you start to see references of you as a 5-year-old dog boy, and it's all very weird and surreal and meta. And then Kevin, like, imagine you love a Goofy movie, and then 30 years later, you're putting yourself into this narrative, and then Kevin has like, he was really wonderful about it, but he's watching it, and we're talking about it, and your like 5-year-old brain is exploding because you're like, okay, I'm putting this in, talking to the director of a Goofy movie about my family life when I was 5, and I'm there as a dog boy, and this is all too much for me to process and handle. And but it was honestly walking away from it, and I've told Kevin this, the whole experience has been so much more therapeutic for me, and really, like, I'm so thankful for him giving that note and for allowing me to do that. And incredibly generous of him to even suggest it. Honestly, I mean, it's really a movie about Kevin and this gift he gave to the world, and the rest of that ragtag team. And incredibly generous of him to say, you should consider putting yourself here. And he certainly didn't have to do that. So, yeah.
Well, and I think too, what with the reason that he suggested, because it's a movie about a documentary about the making of a film that has had such a strong legacy because it connected on such a deep level. And that's just you give the personal example of why did you want to tell this? Because that's what it did for you, which is what it's done for millions of people for 30 years now.
Right.
And so I think it is one of just those hooks to it that, it gives the documentary the same personal feel that the movie had. There's just that humanity to it, that authenticity to it. Whether you're talking about strange behind the scenes notes, or even why are we making this in the first place? Because it connects and resonates with people.
And I think those stories, I mean, you'll talk to Kevin or Bill or anyone involved with the Goofy movie, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but I mean, those stories are just everywhere. I mean, you guys hear those stories constantly. This movie meant so much to me because of, this reason or that reason, which is really kind of special. I mean, you can't say that about every single, Disney movie ever made. This like really lives in this very special, unique place. And that's a story worth telling and sharing, I think, as documentarians.
Well, I just have a few more questions. One of them trying to moving in the fun direction.
Yeah.
On, which got heavy there. It's good, but let's counterbalance with
this little interview is taking the same shape as the documentary.
Right.
But speaking of Powerline and the great songs, maybe wanting to make a spin-off Powerline movie someday. Did you ever expect Powerline and those songs to have such staying power for 30 years?
I didn't expect any of it, a piece of it. So it's all a huge surprise. The fact that these songs have lived on, and that I can't go on to my social media without seeing someone singing or doing something from the movie, especially like the perfect cast. There are guys dressing up like Powerline out there going to all the conventions. It's like, it's crazy. So no, I couldn't have imagined any of it, but I'm so grateful that it's happened, right? That these songs have staying power. Right? They speak to you. And it's thematically what the movie's about, right? Those two songs give you the theme of the movie. Eye to Eye is totally what the movie is about. For the first time ever, we're seeing it eye to eye. It's a theme of the movie. And if that can be a lesson that people walk around singing in their head all day, maybe we've made some difference.
Is that a Powerline right behind you, Kevin? I'm just noticing this for the first time. I think there's Powerline. Yes. That's great.
He's right there, and these are the pop figures, which you can't see because of the sun.
Oh, great.
Anyway. And there's nobody else but you over here. Oh, there's Max. Powerline Max. And nobody else but you. Anyway.
With the movie, I guess I'll kind of maybe open this up to everyone, but what do you think is most what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about a Goofy movie?
Oh, man.
Did your wife come up with this question? Wow. You know, I think it's funny because I just recently opened up an envelope that was filled with reviews. And there was an envelope inside that envelope, which was the Disney TV animation answering people's letters. And those letters were all filled with, you know, I don't understand how you could have made this movie. Max is a brat. He talks back to his dad. He undermines his principal and gets rewarded for it. You know, we left after the first 20 minutes because we were so disgusted by his behavior. And I think maybe I'd point to that because we were playing into what we thought was truthful and real. That when you are a teenager, you're just filled with all of this anxiety. And Max's journey being raised by Goofy, which is like a theatricalized, ideal, pushed him to, to take these kinds of actions. And the movie proves out something different, right? He starts out in this place, but he learns something about both himself and his dad. And dad learns something about himself and his kid. So I would think that maybe that felt misunderstood. I felt misunderstood. The movie is, not necessarily sort of putting across such a negative stereotype. It's trying to be truthful.
Right. It's not celebrating the behavior.
No,
it's just,
no.
This is what teenagers are like. These are what complicated father-son relationships are like.
Right, right. In fact, when we showed the movie to our first test audience, we got notes back in the cards that were all about like, oh, I hate Lester's Possum Park. Max is so angry. He lashes out at his dad in a way that feels like it's way too much. I would never let my children talk to me that way. And I had to beg the studio not to cut the scene. Because without that scene, you don't have what comes after it, right? It's Max's breaking point and his dad going, oh, there's something really wrong here. I need to pay attention to this. So luckily we won. We won that argument. It's dramatic structure. The audience isn't supposed to like that moment. It's supposed to be uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. I think that's the piece in filmmaking, why I think these sorts of behind the scenes documentaries are so important to help people understand the difficult process of getting a movie made and knowing what to do with feedback. You do a test screening, people are irritated by something sounds like that's a bad thing, but it's also an indicator it worked. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. And so how do you process that, right? And how do movies kind of get changed in the process, everything? And I heard someone say that being a director is, it's a storyteller, but it's also being a politician at the same time and a businessman all at the same time. You go, and these sorts of stories like help people to understand that better.
Right, right. Yeah, you are a storyteller. You're a storyteller first and foremost, right? And you use the tool of story to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Even your marketing team, even your executives, you're constantly pushing story. This is the reason. This is the story reason. This is a dramatic reason this exists. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. Navigating Hollywood is not an easy task.
And I think we'll kind of close out on kind of two different ones that I think they can go together with your answers. But why do you think that a Goofy movie means more to people now than it did when it kind of came out? And then what do you want people to take away from the documentary?
I think a Goofy movie is generational. because as a kid, you can see it from Max's perspective. And, you know, as all of us who grew up with a Goofy movie are now getting older and having kids of our own and everything, you can see it from Goofy's perspective. And it's this cycle that, you know, hopefully it keeps on repeating, and then we maybe get more a Goofy movie stories from it all. Chris and I are pushing that hard.
Yeah, I think that's the truth of it. Really, is that it does have a generational wheel in its storytelling, and that kids who loved it are now parents, are now filmmakers, are now critics. So they're able to talk about the movie in a way that that resonates with them, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that and they have a voice, and they have social media, which gives them a way to express that voice, you know. So I think it's really blossomed because of its, you know, it started with its first audience, and now it's moving into its second generational audience. So yeah, we can only hope that it keeps going and going.
Mm-hmm. And what do you want people to take away from the documentary in general?
Man, that's such a big question. I feel like there's so many things that I want people to take away from the documentary. I don't know. Do you have a?
I think one thing is that art matters, and something as silly as Goofy, like a character as silly as Goofy, can mean so much, and because it stuck with Chris and I enough to inspire us to create something else based on it. So if it's not for, you know, people like Kevin and all the folks that made a Goofy movie, you know, it allows people to express themselves and understand their feelings, which is a pretty important and impactful thing, especially in a kid's life. So I'd say that's one thing.
Honestly, I mean, that's really it. I mean that's the message that comes up at the beginning of our film, is that, you know, a character as silly as Goofy can mean so much. So it's I think sometimes animated projects geared towards kids, they're not eye to eye with their viewers, so to speak. And but I think, like, if you're not to be afraid. I think creatives shouldn't be afraid of big themes and big ideas for their younger audiences or any audience. I think even grown-ups like can forget sometimes the power of that art has, and whether that's, you know, an escape for a couple hours because you just want to watch dinosaurs run around a theme park, or whatever it is, there is value in all of it, and it really does can mean the world to people, and a Goofy movie has sure done that for us.
And Kevin, is there something that you wanted people to take away from seeing the documentary?
I think the guys have sort of touched on it for me. You know, I go back to sort of my eyes being opened when I saw the Atlanta episode. I don't know if you've seen that, Sean, but it's kind of remarkable when something you've made gets taken by another artist and turned into something bigger than it is. And that's kind of remarkable to me, that this movie, which I thought of as being just a stepping stone, has become sort of a way for other artists to express themselves. And that's kind of remarkable.
I know, just kind of, for me, as sometimes you don't realize how much something means to you, how much nostalgia it can pull out, and how much staying power something has until you kind of see the documentary, and like how powerful it really was, even for me. Even as I mentioned a couple times, and you're just getting the message about what I want to watch a documentary about the making of that. I wouldn't have thought that I did until I knew it existed. And then when I mentioned, saw that DM, I was like, yeah, I mean, I would love to talk about the making of this thing that was this piece in my childhood 30 years ago that
Right.
I've shown to my kids a bunch of times, and we listen to Eye all the time. And that generational thing we just talked about, I mean, that's my story of watching it with my kids and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I don't even just like thinking about where Hollywood's at right now with so many, they're going for such big films. And then the one that, you know, as you guys talk about in the documentary, was made by the B team, tried to be almost sidelined.
I think it was the D team, to be quite honest with you. That's the way they thought. Lion King was the B team. So if Lion King is the B team, then what are we?
Is that true? They thought of Lion King as the B team?
Oh, yeah, when it was being made, yeah.
Blowing my mind.
It's so crazy, like how much talent was in this one place at a time that the Lion King's the B team and Goofy movie is the D team. And it's like, there was so much staying power in what they were able to create in that window of time that was just really, really good in this multi-generational sense. It's fascinating to see, like, whatever that is, that sometimes there's those sparks of just so much creativity. And
we all, as artists, we all wanted it so badly. Right, we had all lived through the Black Cauldron and that whole era, and there was a chance to sort of reinvent it, and we were going to do it no matter what. And I think you see it in the movies.
Yeah, and I love it. Everybody thinks the movies of their childhood were the best movies, but man, what a great era for movies at that time.
You kids of the '90s were so lucky.
I know I feel that way. Hey, thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you so much, both for your time for this interview, but also making the documentary, making a movie that, like I said, I've watched with my whole family. But beyond that, I mean, I've seen Enchanted a zillion times, and watched with my whole family and everything. And actually, coincidentally, this is totally unrelated to this interview. We just happened to watch 102 Dalmatians last night too, independent of this entirely. It was just for different reasons we ended up watching it last night.
Did you know?
I was like, wait a minute.
Did you know it? Did you know going in that I had directed it?
Yeah, I did, but wasn't thinking about it. I was like, oh wait, I'm talking to the director of this tomorrow. It was like that sort of situation, because we're just watching through the Disney live action remakes right now. Because they have so many of them coming out. So we started back with 101 Dalmatians. We watched that a week ago, and then so this week it was 102 Dalmatians. I was like, wait a minute,
the universe is folding in on itself.
What's going on right now? And then we're like, but the guy that directed this I'm talking to, he also did Enchanted. Enchanted. The kids are just freaking out and all that. So it's been a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad you're having fun doing that.